Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good afternoon / evening. We're sort of in between time. Welcome. How are you? Woo! Mind openers! I'm Luna. I'm the Director of Public Policy at the Citizens League, and I am really excited on behalf of our entire team to welcome you to Mind Openers. This is our first Mind Opener in a couple of years after a hiatus, so we are really excited and grateful that you're here. I have some information and some gratitudes, and then we'll rock and roll into a really exciting conversation. So first of all, big thanks to the Citizens League team. They're all around here. We're a small, mighty team supported by a great board of directors, some of whom are here with us, and interns and fellows when we have them. But events like this are all hands on deck. So Yvonne, Jacob, Maddie, Kalia, Jake, thank you for all you've done for today and just all the time. Thank you also to Bad Weather Brewing for this great and bright space. As many of you have seen, and I mentioned a few minutes ago, at the bar, there's all manner of brewery beers, but also non-alcoholic beverages. We have water in here, but treat your bartenders well, please. There's a food truck outside. As you can see, we're going to keep that wooden sliding door closed for the duration of the panel just for noise. So if you're going to go out to get a beverage or go to the restroom, you can go out and out the little glass pavilion in the center there in terms of logistics. We are recording this evening. We want you to know that. That's for disseminating information on paid family medical leave after this conversation, which will bring together a number of perspectives and questions about the implementation. If you have questions during the program, there are note cards on your tables and pens. There are also note cards up at the front. If you don't have one, write them down, slide them to the side. I will do a little roundabout a little later to collect questions to give to Jake. What else do I have to tell you? There are 2 sheets with information about paid leave from Deed on the front table if you want to grab them now or on your way out. And also scattered around the tables are printout copies of the slides. We recognize this monitor is a little bit small, so those are just printouts of the presentation you're going to see for visibility's sake. Pardon? Please share around as needed. I also want to wish you a very happy National Voter Registration Day today. So, National Voter Registration Day, largest national nonpartisan civic holiday dedicated to registering all eligible voters in the United States. And so, also sprinkled around, you have a lot of things on your desk tables. Also sprinkled around are stickers. They have QR codes. Check your registration tonight. Encourage others to do so. You can also do that at mnvotes.gov. Finally, the Citizens League is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that for nearly 75 years has been encouraging civic engagement in Minnesota for a better state for all of us. What that looks like is study committees and paid policy projects, collaborations with organizations, research reports, supporting a policy career pathways internship program cohort model for undergraduate students of color, celebrating 10 years this year, and events like this for the public that bring together educational opportunities and diverse perspectives on public policy topics. For all of us to learn from one another. Civic life is for all of us. We're really grateful that you're a part of it. You can learn more about our work in the impact reports, also on your table, and make a donation to us if you feel inclined with materials on the table. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. If you have any questions or ideas for us about tonight or about policy work moving forward, you can email policy@citizensleague.org. And now let's have a robust conversation about paid family and medical leave implementation in multiple sectors in Minnesota. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Citizens League Executive Director and your host, Jake Lowe.
Luna said has her elevator speech down. A game show, but here we are. Thank you all for being here. I'm Jake Loesch. I'm the Executive Director of Citizens League. I have been in the role a year tomorrow is on my 1 year anniversary. I had the opportunity to serve on the board of directors with the league for a few years before joining. So I've been around the organization for a while and have a deep respect for the the work we get to do and the community of folks just like you who help make this possible. So thank you for being here. Thrilled for our conversation today. Paid leave obviously is a very relevant topic that many of us are thinking about in different ways, whether you're an employee or just someone who's interested in a big new state program. So I'm thrilled to welcome Greg Norfleet to join us tonight. Greg is the director of the state paid leave program here in Minnesota. He'll be sharing some slides and presentation about implementation to date before we get into a panel discussion with a few employer perspectives on kind of how this program is rolling out and how their members and businesses and employers in the state are planning. So before coming to Minnesota, Greg served as the Deputy Director for Operations at the Massachusetts Paid Family Leave Medical Program, which launched in 2021. And he was also the Chief Operating Officer for the Massachusetts Department of Early Education and Care. Before that, Greg was a member of the Massachusetts Strategic Innovation Team, which was an in-house consulting group that worked on critical initiatives for the governor's office in Massachusetts. He was a government innovation fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School and holds a Master of Science in Evidence-Based Social Intervention from the University of Oxford. That's a mouthful, Greg.
Yeah.
And a bachelor's degree in Sociology and Criminal Justice from Indiana University. They've been on a roadshow all over the state, bringing this presentation to communities all over, so we're really glad to have you here tonight. Greg, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. All right. Hi, everybody. As Jake said, my name is Greg Norfleet. I'm the director for Minnesota Paid Leave. I want to thank you all for coming tonight and learning a little bit about the program. The presentation is going to be split up into 3 parts. First, a general overview of what paid leave is. Next, an update on our implementation to date. And then last, a preview of what the role of the employer might look like under the paid leave program. Before I do that, though, the first thing I really want to talk about is moments. Paid leave is really about moments, big moments in your life. Some of these moments are happy, like welcoming a child into your home. Other moments are much more challenging, like dealing with a serious health condition of your own or of a family member. Those moments really matter to people in Minnesota and to employees, but they also really matter to employers. And from experience in the Massachusetts program, I know that when an employee has a serious healthcare event, more often than not, the employer wants to be there for them. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is to create a program that allows employers to be there for their employees during those big life moments. I'm relatively new to Minnesota, moved here last October, and really one of the big things that I've learned from being here is that there is a culture of taking care of one another here, in ways big and small, whether it's helping out during the harvest or shoveling your neighbor's driveway, or when I first got here, the crash on I-35, where everyday Minnesotans pulled over to the side of the road and pulled someone out of flaming wreckage to save their life. In ways big and small, Minnesotans have stepped up for one another everywhere. And this program is a continuation of that. Paid leave is about supporting people when they need time to care for themselves and for their loved ones. The benefits for employees are fairly clear. We've seen in other implementations improvements for the health of children, families, mothers returning to work. We've also seen positive outcomes for employers, including improved employee retention, improved performance and morale while on the job. Really, what the paid leave program is dedicated to doing is making sure that during those big moments during a person's life, that they don't have to choose between financial stability and being there for their families. So a quick overview of what the law is. The law was passed in 2023 and was updated in the last legislative session. The law creates a paid family and medical leave insurance program that's going to go live on January 1st, 2026. This law provides both job protections and partial wage payments paid by the state to individuals during a qualifying condition, such as bonding with a new child or to take care of your own serious healthcare condition. The program is going to be funded by premiums, much like in private insurance. They can be split between employers and employees. The program really fits into 2 big buckets, medical leave and family leave. Medical leave is exactly what it sounds like. It's time off to care for your own serious healthcare condition. And when I say your own serious healthcare condition, I'm talking about an event that's going to keep you out of work for an extended period of time. So compared to something like ESST, this is not for like a day-to-day absence. This is for an absence that lasts at least 7 days in order to qualify. And that condition needs to be certified by a healthcare provider that the leave is medically necessary. But that first bucket, medical leave, care for yourself. Family leave is a little bit broader. It includes leave to welcome a child into your home, whether through birth, foster care, or adoption, caring for a loved one during their own serious healthcare condition, as well as providing support to survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, and to our military members during the deployment, either domestically or abroad. The program offers up to 12 weeks of medical leave and up to 12 weeks of family leave within a benefit year. A benefit year starts the first day of absence. That said, 12 weeks of medical leave, 12 weeks of family leave, but you are limited to 20 weeks in total during those 52 weeks. The program is very broad. It applies to nearly all Minnesota employers. Regardless of the size of your business, the number of employees, your revenue, you're likely covered by the paid leave program. It also includes nearly all Minnesota employees, whether full-time, part-time, temporary, interns, hourly, and most seasonal workers are covered by the law. The exceptions are for independent contractors and self-employed individuals, but they also have the opportunity to opt into coverage. There's also one small exclusion for seasonal hospitality employees that we'll talk about a little bit more later in the presentation. So I mentioned the program has two parts: wage payment, or partial wage replacement, and job protections. Partial wage replacement is meant to help an individual not have to choose between financial stability and taking time to care. But the partial wage replacements are going to be paid on a progressive scale. What that means is that those who make the least will have the highest percentages of their wages replaced while they're out. When somebody goes out on leave, they'll be able to receive up to 90% wage replacement while taking the leave up to a maximum value of the statewide average weekly wage. The actual math is a bit harder than this, but closer to implementation, we'll be building tools to help folks be able to put their own conditions in so they can see what this program would look like for them. In order to qualify for partial wage replacements, the person has to have earned at least 5.3% of the statewide average annual wage in the past year. That number is just under $4,000. So it's an income threshold that you have to be at least 5.3% of the statewide wage in order to qualify. Job protections are different. And they apply to both large and small businesses. Under the program, if an employee takes a leave, they must be restored to the same position or an equivalent position with the same pay, status, benefits, length of service, and seniority as they enjoyed prior to taking the leave. Unlike the wage threshold, job protections have a tenure threshold, which means that an employee is eligible for job protections 90 days following the date of hire. So I do want you to think about those two things separately. Partial wage replacements is an earnings threshold. Job protections is a length of tenure threshold. So we're building this program from the ground up. That comes with a lot of opportunities. We have no legacy systems, no legacy data, no legacy processes, no legacy ways of doing things, which means that we have the opportunity to build the program that Minnesota deserves. It can also be kind of daunting because it's building a very large program in a very short amount of time, but we're not alone in this. Minnesota is going to be the 13th state to implement a statewide paid family medical leave program. And we're in contact with each one of these states, sharing best practices related to policy, process, technology, and just generally what makes a successful paid leave program. So we are getting a lot of support from throughout the country in order to build the best program for Minnesota. We also are getting a ton of support from within the state. Legislation created a new division within DEED, which is the paid leave division, and we're responsible for overall program build-outs and for making benefits to folks when they're out on a qualified leave. We're partnering with the Department of Labor and Industry, who's going to oversee the job protection provisions in the law, and the Department of Commerce, who's going to help us with the private plan portion of the law. Private plans, we can talk about in a little bit of depth later on, but it's basically that an employer may choose to offer these benefits themselves, but they can either purchase a private plan from a carrier or they can self-insure. The Department of Commerce is going to help us evaluate those plans to make sure they are at least as generous as what the state is offering. And last, we're partnering with the Division of Unemployment Insurance to make the first major milestone in the program, wage detail collection, a success. So we talked a bit about support that we're getting from across the country and within the state, but the most important part is you. Paid leave looks different to different people, depending on where you sit. If you're a small business owner, a large business owner, or someone who's going to be claiming benefits, the program needs to work for you. So we made it a priority to try to get out in front of as many audiences as we can to really understand perspectives and what a successful paid leave program looks like to a diverse group of people. So since December, we've taken on over 100 engagement sessions with a variety of stakeholders and answered questions and got input for the program. Those note cards are like gold for us. We hope we get copies of them at the end of the presentation because that is valuable feedback to understand what employers or claimants or generally consistent people within Minnesota, what are you thinking about and what would success look like? Now's a great time to tell us because we're still designing this today. In addition to these sorts of public engagement meetings, we're also doing a process called rulemaking. Rulemaking is the process that state agencies go through to pass regulations or rules to clarify things that either aren't in the statute directly or the legislator gave us the ability to clarify. So we've been drafting rules on a variety of areas. You guys can see these in the PowerPoint that we got, as well as online. We have topic guides available on our website that can show our current thinking in a variety of different areas of how we want this program to look. One I'd probably draw your attention to is the role of the employer. What should an employer do during a paid leave application? What does success look like for an employer in Minnesota? As part of this process, we had 19 virtual engagement sessions that drew over 950 attendees and generated nearly 600 comments. But the process is not over. There's still a chance to weigh in here, either at the end of October or early November. We're anticipating posting a public request for comment, and that's a great time for you to review the draft rules that we're putting together and tell us if they make sense for you as in Minnesota. A few milestones on the horizon. We just mentioned the public comment period on rulemaking. But the first major milestone for the program happens at the end of next month. The first wage detail reports are due. We'll talk about that in a little bit more depth in just a minute. We're also anticipating providing initial guidance on how private plans will work for the program by the end of the year and opening up for applications early next year. We're also going to support community outreach grants beginning in the middle of next year. These are targeted to community-based organizations, and therefore communication, outreach, and technical assistance for employers, employees, and self-employed individuals to ensure equitable access to the program. There is a notification requirement that every employee in Minnesota needs to be notified about the availability of benefits by December 1st, 2025. We'll talk a bit about that as well. And then in 2026, the program launches. Starting on January 1st, employees will be able to take leaves and receive job or partial wage replacements for qualifying conditions. It's also when payroll deductions can begin. The legislature pre-funded our account so that we have 2 quarters worth of benefit payments already on hand. So these first returns that we're getting are for informational purposes only. No payments due at this time. The first payments for the program are going to be due on April 30th, 2026. And that will be for wages earned between January 1st and March 31st of that year. At the same time, we're also going to launch a small business assistance grant program that's going to provide funding to small businesses when they have an employee out on qualified leave. The last thing that I want to hit on, kind of to lead into the panel for today, is what the role of the employer is going to look like under the program. We know that employers are a valued stakeholder in making this program work for Minnesotans. A successful paid leave program values the perspectives of employers, employees, and healthcare providers in the way that we designed it. And when we think about how employers are going to engage with a paid leave program, you put it into 4 major buckets. educating and informing your employees about the program, reporting wages and paying premiums to fund the program, supporting leave administration through coordinating leaves and other benefits that an employee may receive during the course of an absence, and collaborating and improving this program over time with us. Going through each one of those, with informing your workforce, the reason why this is important is that across all other implementations, we found that the most effective messenger for paid leave is the employer themselves. Employees look to employers for information about the benefits that are available to them. So we're making an effort to help employers become effective and enthusiastic messengers for the program. So when their employees have one of those big moments in their life, that they're prepared to help them. Now, there are two notification requirements under the statute. The first is hanging a workforce poster in a conspicuous place in English in any language spoken by more than 5 employees. This is just like FMLA, it's just like ESST, it's just like workers' compensation. We'll create this poster, we'll translate it, and we'll make it available for download on our website closer to your implementation. The next is that every employee in Minnesota needs to be notified about the availability of benefits by December 1st, 2025. That's either 30 days following the date of hire or 30 days before premium collection begins. We're again going to create a model notification letter for employers available on our website in multiple languages that they can download and use to notify their employees. This last one is a little bit more complex. It's notifications for people who've been designated as seasonal employees. So there is a small exclusion under the law for seasonal hospitality workers. They are not required to participate, but it's extremely narrow. It is part of the 3-part test. First, the employer needs to be seasonal. A seasonal employer is one who earns 2/3 of their revenue in 6 months of the year. If you pass that test and you're seasonal, then you also have to work in hospitality. That's a defined term in the statute. It links to a series of businesses, including food carts, hotels, resorts, and similar sorts of businesses. If you're on that list, then you're seasonal and you're in hospitality. At that point, you're able to designate any employee who works less than 150 days as a seasonal employee that's not required to participate in the program. It's a very narrow exclusion, and it's a pretty complex part of the law. So we're going to put some serious effort into making this easy to navigate. And as part of that, we'll make sure to send notification to both the employee and the employer of any designation decision. The next big thing for employers, reporting wages and paying premiums to fund the program. The first major milestone for the program is this October 31st deadline for wage detail reporting. In our early engagement sessions, the thing that we heard from employers was that they wanted us to limit the complexity of this program as much as we possibly could. We took that to heart and we started working with the best unemployment insurance division in the country. And we designed a process where most employers are already in compliance. So for anyone who is participating in the unemployment insurance program, with all of your employees participating in UI, you are already in compliance for this deadline. What we did was we took your existing UI account and we transformed it into a UI paid leave account. So it's one filing for both programs. So if you already participate in UI, there's no action to be taken. If you don't participate in UI, because our eligibility criteria is broader, we've also created the ability to create a paid leave only account. With a paid leave only account, employers going through the UI website go through the same registration flow as they would if they were registered for UI. But by getting a paid leave only account, you don't create a liability for UI. You don't enroll in that program. But that's the small side. For most employers, the work is already done. We have nearly 200,000 accounts already created. So most employers are in compliance for October 31st already. These first returns are for informational purposes only, but starting in January 2026, we're going to start collecting premiums to fund the program. Much like under private insurance, premiums are used to fund the benefits when someone is out on leave. and they can be split between employer and employee. Like the rest of the program, the premium is split between a family premium and a medical premium. And then that is split again into an employer portion and an employee portion. By default, that's a 50-50 split. But the employer portion is a minimum. The employee portion is a maximum. So the employer could choose to pay more for some or all of their employees if they chose to do so. There's also a small reduction for employers with fewer than 30 employees with a reduced premium rate that's 75% of the size of larger businesses. So we talked about notifying your employees, reporting wages and paying premiums. Now, coordinating benefits and other leaves. We know that paid leave can't exist on an island. It has to fit into a bigger picture. Employers are busy people that need to coordinate FMLA, short-term disability, earn sick and save time, and we're committed to helping make that process easy. We have a number of concepts in the law, like supplemental benefits that allow an employer to top up. So if they want to make up the difference between partial and full wage replacement, there's a process for that. But we need to have an open line with employers to make sure that everyone's getting the right amount of money. I mentioned this briefly, that we're also offering small employer assistance. This is for Minnesota employers with 30 or fewer employees with an average wage of under 150% of the statewide, which is about $105,000. If you're an employer with fewer than 30 employees, where your average employee makes less than $105,000, you may be eligible for grant funding when you have an employee go out on leave. It's funding up to $3,000 per absence to cover either temporary employees or to increase other workers' wages to cover for them while they're out on leave. We're also offering community outreach grants. This is about $7 million worth of funding targeting community-based organizations across the state to focus on outreach, education, and technical assistance to employers, employees, and self-employed individuals. This is a bucket of money that we're looking to make sure that the program can be accessed equitably by folks across the state. The last bit is working with us. There's a lot of ways to stay in touch with the division. First, our website, paidleave.mn.gov, is a great place to get the most up-to-date guidance. We have FAQs. They come from sessions just like this. We also have an employer toolkit that we're building with the idea that we're going to create a single resource for employers to go to be prepared to participate in the program. We issue a regular newsletter that gives you updates on our implementation as we go. And we also have a form available on the website to ask questions directly and get a response via email if you have a specific question about the program. There's going to be a ton of opportunities coming up to engage with us and provide feedback on this program. As we mentioned, we're still very much in the design phase, so there's totally chances to weigh in. And whether through rulemaking or through testing solutions as we go, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to engage with us. So with that, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to learn a little bit about paid leave, and I'll be around at the end in case there are any questions.
Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate you walking us through all of that. So before we get started with the panel Before we get started with the panel discussion, if you have any questions specifically for Greg or any other questions about paid leave that have come up, please go ahead and use the note cards. Luna will be available to collect them if anyone hasn't yet. Yeah? No? Okay. There you go. Great. We got at least one. If anything else comes up during our panel discussion, please feel free, maybe just throw a note card in the air. We'll be keeping an eye out. We'll do our best to get to as many of those questions as we can. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I will invite Marie, Gavin, and Lauryn to come on up and take a seat, if you don't mind. Thank you for being here. Marie Ellis is the Public Policy Director for the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, where she supports nonprofits of all sizes, developing and advocating for MCN's policy priorities at the local, state, and federal level. And I think you are the largest association of nonprofits in the country.
We are. Thanks for
Well, in the
listening.
land of 10,000 nonprofits, we would expect not less.
Largest and best.
There we go.
Yeah.
Of course. Gavin Hanson is the Fiscal and Economic Policy Director for the Minnesota Business Partnership, an association that represents more than 100 CEOs and senior executives from Minnesota's largest employers. And Lauryn Schothorst is the Director of Workplace Management and Workforce Development Policy. You might need to talk to somebody about the length of that title.
It's the short version.
For the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, which represents more than 6,300 companies employing more than 500,000 people statewide. So thank you. We're very excited to have this powerhouse panel with us today. Experts who are working with a lot of employers around the state as they plan for the implementation of this program. So we'll go ahead and get started. I guess I'm going to open this one to all of you. I have a few questions for all of you, but to start us off, when you think about paid leave and the implementation amongst your association members and the organizations that you represent, what feels like the biggest hurdle or challenge, and on the flip side, the biggest opportunity? Does anything stick out as either one of those that you could share a little bit more about for us? If anyone wants to start, please feel free.
You picked up me.
You picked it up first, Gavin. It's you. Oh, Lord.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. I would say first to just describe our membership a little bit further. And 6,300 members. The majority of our members are small businesses. So 75% of chamber members have 100 employees or less. And they span the state. So 60% are in the Twin Cities area and 40% are statewide. So we really think the challenge is education and awareness component of it first. Greg has been going around the state, and I will say, Greg, we've talked a lot. You're doing such good work running around the state, Linda, making sure that businesses are aware of this program. We're just coming off of the implementation of Safe and Safe Time, which I still think businesses don't know about across the state, and it's 7 or 8 months into the year. And so, getting out and having large crowds come to hear, and you guys, please continue to share the message that this is coming, because people don't know that it's out there. So making sure people know what their two requirements are, when they need to make the notifications to employees, and when it goes live is a big challenge. I think maybe we talk about challenges in the other groups before going into opportunities.
Yeah, let's start with challenges, then we'll talk about opportunities. Sound good.
Thank you for having us, Jake. I really appreciate it. First, I want to say some of the people I rely on as my own paid leave experts are in the crowd, which this is interesting. So,
It's a task, Gavin.
But anyway, I just wanted to say, again, thank you for the introduction. I think you kind of summed up our organization very well, the partnership. And something you'll hear me kind of say several times today is just that most of all of our members provided some form of paid leave prior to this legislation passing. For a number of reasons, it was a policy that's really important to our membership for taking care of their employees, for retention of employees, for recruitment of employees. I think going into this, one of the biggest struggles is going to be is just as Mr. Norfleet was kind of explaining in the previous presentation. It's a big plan. It's a huge new policy that's going to be run by the state, and the upheaval that these companies that do have to transition to the state plan is going to be significant. I think there's a lot of unknown still, and Greg has heard me say this numerous times. Everything I say, Greg has heard me say like 20 times. But anyway, there's a lot of questions still about what that's going to look like, because this is such an important benefit for when people need it. And if they have a really good plan right now at work, and their company switching to the state plan for a number of reasons, the unknown of what that's going to look like, the upheaval of what that's going to look like, is a big concern going forward.
Yeah, I'll concur. I don't like panels where people just say the same thing over and over. But lack of awareness, I think, is really a big issue right now, particularly at very small nonprofits. So about 75% of nonprofits in Minnesota have an annual revenue of $1 million or less. That's just a handful of employees. There's probably not an HR manager. It's the executive director that's dealing with HR. Right? That's what I'm saying. My organization does have an HR manager. We are very blessed. But I think at nonprofits as well, there tends to be work that is so immediate and community needs that are so immediate that to prepare in advance for something is particularly difficult. So making sure people are aware now and that they know they need to prepare in advance is going to be huge. And actually, I should have backed up a little bit and said a bit more about my constituency as well. So the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits has about 2,200 members across the state. And when we talk about nonprofits, I've learned that a lot of people hear that and they think soup kitchens, food banks, emergency shelters, right? But they're forgetting the citizens leagues of the world. They're forgetting the organizations that support military veterans, that provide volunteers to help people stay in their homes. Chambers of Commerce, which are 501c6s, which is indeed a nonprofit, just a little bit different form. I should also add that Mayo Clinic and a lot of the private colleges are nonprofits. There's some bigger ones, but like I said, 75% are small, so budget's under $1 million. And then I'll maybe just move on to biggest opportunities since I already have the microphone. One of the things that the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits has been working on for years is working with the state and reforming some of their practices in partnering with nonprofits through grants and contracts, which is, there are a lot of grants and contracts between the state and nonprofits for a lot of really good reasons. And there are some really cumbersome practices for those. And the state is left without all of the partners that it maybe would potentially have and would really like to have because of some of that cumbersomeness. And so when we're looking at those small employer grants that Greg talked about, not small business grants because nonprofits are eligible as well. So small employer grants and the community outreach grants. I think there's an opportunity for my organization to be working with DEED and the folks putting together those applications and reporting requirements and things to make sure that they are something that nonprofits can actually use and they will be really great for nonprofits.
I'll say that the biggest opportunity in our members' opinion is that it was a missed opportunity. So I'm not going to relitigate the past 2 years of legislative sessions and the public policy debate over the enactment of this program in and of itself, only to say that, like Gavin, over 80% of our members offered paid leave in some form already. And this is a significant new mandate that employers work with their employee base to construct a policy that works for their employees. Paid leave is a popular benefit that employees have, but it's not the only one. And it's not the top priority, depending on where you are situated in the workforce or in the state or in the industry. So it's really disrupting employee benefits. In terms of opportunity, I think as the program needs to get up and running, there's a lot of expertise of our members that we have been involved intimately with the department on ensuring those voices are heard. They're seeking that feedback. There is limitations based on certain statutory rigidity. And, there's another legislative session, Greg, and we're hoping for a very calm and quiet legislative session next year. I have a feeling there might be a few tweaks yet to come that at least for members like ours who already offer the program, or a number of our members have operations in other states that have programs, or in other countries that have programs, or have other regimes that they need to comply with. And one of the things that we heard a lot about during the session is, why isn't Minnesota doing it more like this? Or it'd be great if Minnesota's policy would be more like this so that it's more consistent on a nationwide basis and things like that. So trying to smooth some of those idiosyncrasies is going to be an opportunity that our members are very active and interested in.
Before you go, Gavin, Minnesota has such a track record of calm and quiet elections and sessions. I'm sure we're really going to be in for a good one. Speaking of the legislature, I also just want to identify Representative Dwayne Quam, who is joining us today. Sorry, he's hiding himself. Thank you for coming. We appreciate your meeting. Go ahead, Gavin.
I think an opportunity with the implementation of paid leave is going to be providing ample opportunity for DEED to hear direct feedback from a lot of Minnesota companies, employers, about the employees. Minnesota companies, my members' companies specifically, have phenomenal professional HR departments that have a national footprint. They're oftentimes in states that have already implemented a paid leave program of some sort, of a different variety. And I really do believe that if DEED opens up these conversations to our members' HR department specifically, they have a wealth of professionals that can help implement this better and in a smarter way and avoid as few hiccups as possible. Because again, we do want this to be successful now that it's passed. We want this program to work from day one. And if they can work together with our members, HR departments and things like that, I think it will be a lot smoother transition, hopefully. That's our hope.
Yeah, I will say that, it might seem that employers didn't bring this perspective forward, but a lot of the feedback that we got from our members was on behalf of their employees and the experience of the employees have been going through. Now, it might be a different experience for an employee who might never had to dealt with an HR department or had access to this leader in the past. So that was one of the public policy objectives, was to provide access to something. But for individuals who have historically been in a benefit scenario where they are working with their HR departments, that is going to change, and that experience is going to be different for those employees. And for the over 80% of members of the Chamber of Paid Leave program in place, disrupting that relationship is more of a concern that was brought forward beyond just, cost or mandate or other traditional business concerns.
I'm curious to know a little bit more about that too. I mean, so 80% of your members had some version of paid leave. Gavin, all of the Distant Partnership members, I believe, provided some level of paid leave. So with the implementation of a program like this, aside from the switch of not necessarily having that direct connection with HR, are your members finding, are they having to modify their programs or their offerings? And what does that look like? And how are they thinking about that come January 26th?
So it's an interesting conundrum in that it is a very significant mandate. It's one of the nation leading mandates on its face, but how it actually bears out is in some respects not as generous as what some of our member companies have offered in the past. So it's not intuitive, but I hope that makes sense.
As in, your member companies were providing more than the state? Differently. Okay.
So possibly more, but in a different construction. And if it doesn't adhere to all of the rules and requirements of the program, it's not in place. So if you had a very generous maternity leave policy and a less generous paternity leave policy, and the paternity portion didn't conform to the state mandate, then the whole thing is out of that. So there are going to have to be modifications. And if a company had paid leave already, this idea that we're already in compliance, you don't have to worry about this, is very inaccurate, because you might not have the job protections, you might have the notice requirements, you might not have the wage replacement at a certain level for a certain amount of time, right? So it's different. So we have it's a benefit that has been competitive. Mm-hmm. And if you have to now conform to a mandate for which we're not sure who's going to opt out, who's going to have access to a secondary product, right? And if your employees then go into the state product, how do you top it off?
Yeah.
And what does that do from a cost and competitiveness?
Greg is up.
Just a question. I wonder when you will talk about the percent of your employers who have some kind of paid leave, does that include short-term disability?
The other area of a flexible leave package that takes many forms. So
right. Okay.
Unlimited PTO, certain PTO, paid leave, right? Paid leave, a disability product, right? It's all sorts of flexible arrangements that work for your operations and the administration of those benefits.
Sure.
Some people want to just handle it directly through payroll. Others want their projects and have work through.
I was just curious because there's a difference between, we offer paid leave, it's 3 months fully paid when you have a child, and a difference between we have short-term disability benefits, you will get 5 weeks pay at 60% of your pay. So there, like say, there's different kinds, and that's just good to know. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I would say for our members, Jake, that there's a lot of analyzing going on right now. I receive questions every week from at least one member. Just because we're the largest employers in the state doesn't mean they're all the same. So there are some that have bigger teams that have experienced this already, and others that this is brand new to them. And there's a lot of analyzing going on, trying to figure out how many employees, they obviously know how many employees they have, but what that's going to cost, what that's going to look like, what the possibility of going to the state plan looks like. Some folks don't know quite yet what they're going to do, I think. Some have already made the determination. I know that I was surprised at the number of companies that will likely continue to try and provide a private plan. I wonder how I've asked this talked about this with Dean in the past, but what that's really going to look like for the state plan and how that's going to impact it. But I would just say there's a lot of analysis going on right now. It's early still.
It's about the time where that's going to be January 26th. They still have a little bit over a year to figure out, but it's a lot of details, a lot of coordination, and a lot of employees that we're talking about. And another question I'm curious to know more about, and probably for all of you, as Greg was talking about funding the program through a premium and payroll tax that's going to be that employers, and some of that can be passed on, I believe up to 50% can be passed on to employees. And there were some legislative changes that authorized annual adjustments to that rate. What does those potential adjustments, mean for planning? Are you hearing concerns from are your members or your employers hearing concerns from employees about that, or do we feel like, kind of to your point, Lauryn, that's just not really in people's awareness yet at this point?
So every year the chamber does an annual survey of our members and non-members, and it's scientific and it's massive, and we get a lot of answers to these questions. I had like 55 pages of open-ended answers that was very interesting to read through. But one of our questions was, are you aware that the proposed payroll tax will increase before January 1st from 0.7 to roughly 0.88%? And 24% increase in awareness. 61% of our members answered yes, they were aware of this payroll tax increase, which is good to know that there is that level of awareness. There's still room to grow. It's not 100% awareness. But the concern is when you are budgeting and making large decisions about you've got high and employee benefits and labor costs and those things have a certain amount. And when you're trying to strategically plan ahead, having the risk of a payroll tax increasing beyond what you might have expected is a concern. So, we worked with Dee during the legislative process to put into place some advanced notification type property. So, you're not getting a payroll tax increase and announcement in quarter 4. I think quarter 2, that gives a little bit more time to build into the awareness. And there was this process that we really, it's an insurance product, but it's financed for payroll tax. So employers view it differently. But in an insurance product, you have to have an actual analysis to understand solvency and what that rate should be. And without this program being in place, and for the first couple of years, it's going to be volatile. You've seen in other states, changes dramatically. And one of the things that we communicated is consistency in that rate, so businesses can plan, no surprise charges. And so, doing the work now, it's an increase based on where it was before, but it's communicated in advance. And the idea that increasing the payroll tax now will be smoother later, so you're not going to have that variability. Not that we want to have payroll tax, but at least it's the awareness that you can plan for now, knowing a little bit more what that percentage might be.
Sure. That's helpful. Yeah, thanks.
From the nonprofit sector perspective, our sector faces immense uncertainty on an ongoing basis, right? I mean, grant funding and what philanthropy decides they want to do one year can change wildly. Individual donations can change significantly. What's happening in communities and what, big issues in the news, like that can really affect what a nonprofit is able to do, or they may be shifting what they're doing to continue meeting their mission. And so even if that tax rate does fluctuate some, overall, I think the certainty of being able to plan for that tax is so much better. This is part of the reason my organization supported the policies when it was going through the legislature, is because for nonprofits to be able to say, this is the tax we are going to pay each month, each quarter, whatever, it's so much better than the spontaneous, our colleague has cancer and needs to be gone for a while, and what do we do now? I don't want to make it sound like nonprofits have no financial planning in place. Things like that definitely do, but
We do. I promise.
we do. But so many nonprofits are like 3 people, right? And so that planning just looks different. We also have an annual survey, and actually it'll be probably online on Thursday, so keep an eye out for that. I think there will be a Star Tribune article as well with some of the findings. One of the questions that we ask is, how many months can you operate in the current environment before exhibiting financial distress? We kind of leave the exact definition of that up to respondents. So in 2022, the answer was 47%, about half of nonprofits. In 2024, just a couple months ago with the survey, it was 79% of nonprofits say they have less than a year before they exhibit financial distress. And so margins are very small, and we really can't afford to have people taking leave in a lot of ways. And so that budget certainty that comes from the program is really helpful. I think people also, as organizations are doing that long-term planning, they have a sense that they will have some savings if someone does take leave, right? And they can start planning ahead to think, okay, do we have redundancy internally? Can other people take on a role if someone needs to be gone? And if not, are there consultants that we already work with who could take on some of those roles? Can we sort of be in conversation with them ahead of time and actually kind use some contracted support for funds that would have gone to that employee's paid for time that they're out.
One of the things we fought for 2 years ago when this bill was going through the process was an actuarial analysis, something we wanted done and performed prior to the bill passing and signed by the governor. It was included, but analysis wasn't going to be performed until after the bill was passed, which was a little frustrating. But I think what it proved was that the numbers were very volatile year to year initially, and then the legislature came back this past year and attempted to fix that, and at least I think stabilize it, even though it increased the rates. And I agree with Lauryn. We obviously aren't advocating for higher payroll tax, but we do want the stability there. I think that is long term to what everyone here has talked about is this, the long term ability to plan and operate this plan, whatever it is it looks like. Just that stability is really important. So,
And I mean, that makes a lot of sense. As you're thinking about the future, you mentioned one legislative session before this goes into effect. Are there lessons learned? Gavin, you mentioned that a lot of your member companies and the chamber as well do business in other states where I assume there are 12 states, I believe, that have paid leave of some kind with the 13th. Are there lessons learned from other states that you hope to see implemented here? Or I'll just clump that in with what other modifications or changes might you be advocating for in the future sessions?
Well, that wouldn't be fun to tip our hand now, would it?
Oh, come on.
So, during the debate, yes, there's 13 other states. Not every program is the same. We're one of 4 in this particular construction, so it's a more limited universe. And how many of those are actually up and running? Washington is one. I mean, so not doing some of the things of those other states is good advice. And I know that Greg is looking very seriously at those in Massachusetts too, trying to prevent those. We have members who say, Massachusetts is a really good example. If the rules or the laws can be more drafted in that direction. So, as things get fleshed out, I think there'll be more specific advice as it relates. But one of the big challenges from previous sessions that we felt was the legislature took pieces of every state and kind of went to the max on every element. And so Minnesota collectively has one of the strongest ones in the country. And our members were concerned about scope and broadness and those types of things. We were advocating for refinements of those. So number of weeks, definition of family members, sorts of those types of things. So hopefully picking out the most generous pieces of all the other states doesn't come with challenges in terms of operationalizing this, because I suspect that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Especially when we look at actuarial sciences.
I really hope, and I said this in an earlier comment, that Dee and the legislature works with a lot of our professionals in HR fields and departments on what they can do to try and help implement this program in a more smooth way. Unfortunately, I share Lauryn's frustration a little bit. In the past, a lot of those things were brought up, meetings privately, in committee, and really kind of fruitless efforts were made to try and implement some things that work well in Washington or Massachusetts. I know, for example, Washington worked very well with the business community to try and implement something that worked for the employers in the state and the employees. And so we've kind of experienced some challenges there already. Even last session, we were hoping to go into last session trying to fix some things. And what we were met with was a bill that kind of took a step back in a lot of areas that we thought were maybe the small wins we did get that really would help implement this in a smoother way. So yes, I hope we can learn some lessons from things that have happened in other states. Yes, we will be bringing those examples forward, and we just hope they're heard and not viewed as a political attack on the bill, but as this is a functional thing that we can do to make it implement smoother.
And the one main concern that we had as the nonprofit sector was that, like I mentioned earlier, some of those grant programs that were called small business grants, that they included nonprofits. There's a couple different definitions of business in state law, and one does say it must be a for-profit. But obviously that was not the intent of the legislature. They meant employees. And so I think we've got that all smoothed out. Feel good about that.
Maria, I'm going to stick with you for a minute. I think you talked a little bit about this, but obviously there's a range of organizations that are considered nonprofits, from small ones like us or even smaller to a lot of other organizations and doing a lot of important work. For those that do provide those kind of direct care or services, facing workforce challenges, we hear all about this in childcare and PCA work, nursing, elder care, all of these areas. I have to imagine that there's got to be some real challenge with thinking about how to continue delivering the services for these communities in need, and also provide this benefit. So how is that looking, and what are you hearing from those types of organizations?
Well, the premise of the question is that there are not enough employees to work in those one-on-one caring professions, right? The nursing, PCAs, those tend, with the exception of nursing, those tend to be low pay, low benefits, really hard jobs, like physical labor, mental labor, emotional labor. And a big reason why we don't have enough employees right now is because of burnout. It's hard to work in a job that's that hard and not get paid much and not be able to take leave if you need it, not have any of those benefits. And so, the airplane rule, right? You have to put on your own mask before you put on somebody else's oxygen mask. I think that fits really well here. If those workers are burnt out and they can't meet their own needs, they can't meet the needs of their families because they can't take any unpaid leave when something big happens, they will leave. They can't continue to do those jobs. And then that's what really negatively impacts the communities that are being served. But the hope is, and I think this is true, that adding some more of those worker-centered policies and having the opportunity to take leave where they need to will hopefully allow some of those employees to stay doing that work. People get into, PCA work and nursing home work because they really care about people and they want to take care of people. And so we want them to be able to stay in those jobs and support that. So I would reframe it from there aren't enough employees and this program means people may take more leave. And so that's a problem because we'll have even fewer workers. I would reframe that to there aren't enough employees, but supporting employees with paid leave when they need it will allow them to stay in the work longer and then ultimately leading to more available employees. And so, really simply, it lets nonprofits be more competitive employers, which is really important. I'll add to, I think there's a lot we can learn from immigrant communities and communities of color that tend to be a lot more community-oriented and multi-generational in the way that they develop systems of taking care of each other. And I think the dominant culture here can really learn from that. And so implementing paid family medical leave is like a step toward normalizing that, like it is okay to rest when you've had a major operation. It is okay to recover. It's okay to take care of yourself. It's okay to take care of others. And then the last thing I'll add on that is that 75% of the nonprofit workforce is women. And particularly in those professions you mentioned, Jake, PCAs, daycare, those one-on-one caring professions, they are much more proportionately women and women of color. Women, of course, are the people who actually have children, bear the children, and they tend to very disproportionately carry the burden of caregiving for their families and for people close to them. And so, as nonprofits, I think it's kind of in our DNA to treat our workers as fairly and compassionately as possible, which can be difficult when we have funding challenges. So while the initial implementation of paid family medical leave, there's going to be some hiccups, it's going to provide some challenges, but I think long term, the worker-centered policies are really, really going to help our sector.
So we have a couple audience questions, and we're coming up on just about the time we told you this would all wrap up. We have the room till 6, so we're going to ask a few more questions, and then please grab another beer, stay, and mingle. But before we go into that, one thing that I think Citizens League always tries to do is give people the opportunity or highlight misconceptions, myth busting. What can we set the record straight on? So I'll end with this question for all of you, and then we'll have a few others. Greg, I might need your help answering some of these other questions that came in. But what is a misconception within your sector, your association members, your members, as it pertains to paid leave? What would you say is something people misunderstand or don't understand about your members?
I would say the biggest thing is that the chamber and chamber members are not opposed to paid leave. We're opposed to a paid leave mandate that was structured the way that it was through the legislature and the program mechanisms, right? As I mentioned, over 80% of our members are taking some time. So it is the voluntary nature of designing that program for an employee base versus a state mandate, which comes with compliance, legal risks, exposure, all of those things. That is the misconception.
Sure. Thanks.
I'd echo Lauren a little bit. I mean, when you spend 2 years lobbying against legislation, you have misconception that you're opposed to it from it, on its face, but that's not it at all either. Again, our members eagerly support paid leave, the policy of paid leaves, but they want to be able to control it. They want to be able to do it their own way to support their employees. We've got members here in Minnesota that lead the nation in paid leave benefits, and they're a leader in the nation. Other companies across the country look at them to try and see how they can implement it. But I would say that's probably the number one thing. And I think when you testify 3 times a week on a bill, what you're trying to say and what you mean honestly becomes a talking point, and you start to see some eyes roll when you say like, hey, our members, we all have like best paid leave in the country. Start to get some eye rolls with that, but it's true, and I think that's probably the biggest thing is they support the policy itself.
I have 3.
Go ahead.
One is very similar. I think people assume that nonprofits would not support this program because we have such small margins and wouldn't want to be paying into another tax. But one of my colleagues in Montana said it beautifully when she was thinking about the new federal overtime rule. She said nonprofits have operational anxiety, but moral support. I think that sums it up pretty well for this program as well. An interesting misconception that I have run into, and actually once myself fell into, is that as people are thinking about how this works, they're thinking about the tax, right, or the premiums. And then it comes to their thought about their employee taking leave, and they're forgetting that they won't be paying the person during that time. Like they somehow think it'll be both. And so I've multiple times reminded people, but remember, if that person's out for 12 weeks, you won't be paying their salary for 12 weeks. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't think of that. It seems that is the point of the program. So it seems simple, but people seem to be forgetting it. But then the last one, and I think it's really important for nonprofits. I think a lot of nonprofits will assume that this does not affect them when it absolutely does. About half of nonprofits in the state self-insure for unemployment insurance. So like Greg was saying, the account Indeed, if you already pay into unemployment insurance, they can just create an account for you, you're good to go. But that won't work for about half of the nonprofits in the state who self-insure. And then there are a number of laws that exempt small employers, which, like I said, is the vast majority of nonprofits. And so I think they're also going to assume this probably doesn't matter. So my organization has a lot of work to do to make people understand, like, this does matter. It is going to affect you, and you need to start preparing.
Thank you all very much. This is really helpful. So there's one question that came in, which I think even I might be able to answer. So I've done my homework, maybe, or I hope I'm right. Does the paid leave program cover government employees? Is the state of Minnesota walking its talk? The answer is yes, right? There was already some version of paid leave for state employees as a former state employee before this job. So yes, the answer is that it does. Another question that came in, and Greg, I don't know if you are, just maybe just come here if you don't mind. Will there be any updates to that 0.88% rate before 2026? And do we have any data on the first 5 years of enactment in other states and how that was?
So the big change of the legislative session was that we gained the ability to set the contribution rate for the first year. Hasn't happened yet. We anticipate we're going to do that by the end of the year this year. We do have data from other states. It does differ by state, actually. So right now, Colorado just launched this year. They're actually 50% below their projection of how much the program is going to cost. In some other states, I can give the Massachusetts example. We started at 0.78. It's been a while. But
Worry about Minnesota.
Yeah, well, we started at 0.78, and we actually reduced the rate in our first year. We reduced the rate in our second year, but the funding wasn't based on actuarial analyses. It was based off of the formula. So the formula, we created a big surplus. We spent down the surplus. So the rate did go up in the last year, up to 0.88, but then that should be stable over time. And that's about where other states are as well.
One other question that came in from the audience. What thought was put into ensuring how that this connects and dovetails with FMLA and or ADA protections? Is this a replacement for short-term disability?
I love this question. Okay, so with FMLA, an employer can require that paid leave run concurrently with FMLA. So that's explicitly in the statute. The employer has that option. They can also run it concurrently with pregnancy and parental leave, that leave allotment. With ADA, I'm guessing that's kind of return to work stuff. It does have a connection. Maybe it's not as explicit as the FMLA connection. But for a short-term disability, maybe. So there's two ways that short-term disability is going to change based off of the paid leave program and system. The first is that a lot of providers are going to shift to being what are called in-excess coverage, which means that they're going to pay the difference between partial and full wage replacement. So instead of paying full wage replacement or 60% wage replacement, they'll say, we'll pay whatever the state isn't paying. And if you're receiving benefits from the state and a short-term disability provider, by statute, we are the first payer, which means that the short-term disability provider will reduce their benefit payment. We won't reduce ours. For the other option, I think you heard a little bit about short-term disability during the panel session, and a lot of providers will change what they offer. They may even change the name of it so that it could be a paid medical leave program, a paid family program, a paid family and medical leave program that they will offer to employers. It could qualify for an exemption if it meets all of the requirements of the state plan, meaning that it has the same duration, the same benefit payments, the same job protections. So there are options where the short-term disability market, it's not going to go away, it's going to change, is what's probably going to happen.
Thank you.
And Jake, I would say that the topping off piece is really important. Talking about misconceptions, that employers want to pay as little as possible for leaves or whatnot. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure is that for employers, do they have the opportunity to take the full payroll tax if they so choose, if that's in their effective interest, being able to top off and provide 100% of wage replacement versus the 90 to 560. Where does it now? At the top. 77, whatever it ends up being, having somebody have the opportunity to have full wage replacement through an employer portion is an important part of the policy.
Sure.
Yeah, that is part of the law. So with PTO, employers do have the ability to designate certain payments as supplemental benefits, which again are to make up the difference between partial and full wage replacement. The decision to offer those completely up to the employer, but it could be your paid time off, sick time, vacation time. Any payment that you're giving to an employee during the course of the leave could be designated as a supplemental benefit just to make up that difference. An employer may also choose not to offer a supplemental benefit, and the employee could then use their paid time off, and we would offset our benefit down to instead.
Well, the sun has decided to arrive and blind me, so I have one last question and then we'll wrap up. As far as flexibility for small businesses, those 10 employees or less, for things like part-time leave, are there options to negotiate that with their employer or other options being created to help small employers offer higher benefits than the minimums?
So we know that small businesses are probably have the biggest change in front of them. That this is a branding program that it might feel a little bit like FMLA for folks that have already gone through that, but it is different. And for small employers, it is a pretty big change. So we've got a lot of support available for them. We've got our small employer assistance funding, which is available to folks when an employee takes leave for a qualifying reason. We also have a reduced premium rate, so it's cheaper for small businesses to participate. One of the great things about our implementation is that we're part of the Department of Employment and Economic Development, which means that we also can partner with them to help figure out how this fits into the larger economic development, workforce development agenda for the state. For small businesses, whoever had that question, happy to talk to you afterwards. We'd love to get some feedback on ideas, because again, we're in the design portion today, and we're really eager to know how we can make this a success for you.
Thank you very much. Feel free to take a seat if you want. Well, I know we couldn't get to all the questions. I really appreciate everyone joining us tonight, to our panelists for sharing their perspectives, to Greg for joining us. The goal of these events is to help give you a better understanding of topics that are relevant today. So I hope that did that for you, that this did that for you. You learned something, you take something away, how employers are preparing for this new program and how the state is really building this program out. I think we heard a lot today about this is very much a work in progress. The state's building it. Employers are figuring out how to make it work. And there are no doubt going to be a lot of continuing conversations about this over the next year and a half or so as the program gets built out. I also love the fact that we were able to bring people together with some different perspectives. You've heard from Greg about the good aspects of this program. You've heard from some employers and associations here about some concerns and things that are still being figured out. But that's really what the Citizens League tries to find, is opportunities to bring people together to have those really clear discussions, even though we might not all agree on everything. Creating the space to have those conversations and really hear each other out is really important. So if you have any other questions, I know any of our panelists would be happy to talk with you. As Greg mentioned, paidleave.mn.gov is really a one-stop shop of information. I spent a lot of time looking on that before we had this conversation. You can submit questions, you can sign up for monthly updates, and I think they have over 1,000 questions you've already answered in the FAQ, something like that. Hundreds, maybe? There's a lot of them. All right, hundreds. But thank you all for joining us. Mind Openers have been a long-running event series. We're really pleased to be bringing them back. We have more coming up, so check out our events page. And I can't end without a plug. Events like this require time and resources. You heard Marie talk about nonprofits and the financial situation that many of us find us in. Citizens League has been really proud to be the leading voice for nonpartisan, civil, and fact-based dialogue and pragmatic policy solutions in Minnesota for over 70 years. And I can tell you that our work is more important now than ever. So if you've enjoyed tonight's program and want to see conversations like this in the future, please consider a donation to help support our work. Envelopes are available on the table if you want to take them, or even better, use the QR code to donate now before you leave. So thank you all very much for joining us tonight. Thanks to our panelists. Thank you to Greg. Have a great evening. Grab another beer. And thanks for coming. Have a good night.